welcome to Michigan Football at the Voice of College Football. I am one of your post-game hosts, Desmond, here with Mark Rogers. We will have a couple others joining us shortly. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to the channel. Also share it out on social media. It helps grow the channel. And also join Mark's main channel, the Voice of College Football. Join his Discord where you can talk not only college football 24/7, but also NFL football as well. So thank you for joining us. Mark, how are we doing today?
Good.
Good.
Good. And yeah, it's November, and we are barreling toward pretty much of a clear-cut finish in the Big Ten Eastern Division, as everyone expected. The Big Ten West is a mess of mediocre teams, and there's all sorts of other college football playoff implications out there, of course, that are quite interesting. But yeah, so looking forward to the last three games.
Yeah, we've had some, the last 2 weeks, I would say, have brought some surprises and some upsets. And really just this past weekend with, obviously, Clemson was, got beat. Alabama took their second loss, losing to LSU, which was a bit of a surprise. I think that might have been a 13-point spread, something around there. So it definitely shook things up at the top of the college football playoff rankings. And obviously there's another pretty big matchup with Michigan and Ohio State coming up in a couple weeks, and that will, I think, do even more to shake up things and by that time provide some clarity to see how that Final Four is going to shake out. We still have the conference championships and weekend to really hammer things out, kind of the final go round. So it'll be interesting to see how things kind of shake out. But I think we are seeing the parity right now that a lot of people mentioned that they wanted to see, that kind of get tired of the Alabama fatigue, Clemson. Ohio State still has obviously a shot, controls their own destiny, but it looks like we're definitely going to see some different teams up in the top four.
And nobody can tell me that this is going to work itself out. It's not going to work itself out. There's too many variables. There's a glut of too many teams for there not to be a situation where there is going to be a team or two or three that are left out of the playoff that had just as a legitimate of a resume. Now it's going to work itself out because they have to make a selection. If that's what you mean, yeah, it always works itself out because they have to make a selection. But it's not going to work itself out. I don't see that conclusion. Now I see some really crazy, wild log jams that I would love to see. Now I don't know that it's going to get that crazy because teams will lose and eliminate themselves, but I don't know how we're going to get around a number of teams, especially in the SEC, that are going to build up really strong one-loss resumes and not win, Tennessee in particular, not win a division or conference championship, that are going to have just as strong, if not stronger, resumes without the conference championship than other teams, let's say in the Pac-12, the Big 12, or the ACC.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be unique. I think if this were a normal year, I think Tennessee would be just coasting. Of course they took the loss to Georgia, but I think in a normal year, them winning out with that assumption, they would be just fine getting in as a one-loss team, non-conference champion. They have a really good resume, but I think this year, like you mentioned, there's just going to be such a log jam of teams with conference championship, one loss, because watching different videos and things like that, hearing teams talk specifically, we can talk about the Oregon and Georgia argument, or basically Oregon against Tennessee, is the potential of that Georgia-Oregon game was just so lopsided that how do you remove that from the resume or your memory or whatever the case may be, and it's interesting. So I don't know how that is going to happen. I don't think that Georgia is going to lose a game, which obviously we know anything is possible, but I think Georgia will be fine. So that in turn would end up helping Oregon. Is just, well, listen, yeah, we got throttled, but I mean, Georgia did that to a lot of teams, not as drastic, but it'll definitely be interesting to see how things shake up. But we talked about it a couple weeks ago on the channel, and I think I might have said that I think things will work themselves out. And then you started mentioning how these one-loss conference champions are most likely gonna work out, and I tend to agree with you. I don't think it's gonna work out. There's going to be a one-loss Power Five conference champion that is gonna have to watch the playoff. They won't be in, and that'll be interesting. And I can't remember exactly what the committee, if they have the ability to do the 12 teams the next football season, or if 2024 is the soonest that it can happen. I can't. There was some type of language that
Yeah,
they spoke about, but
I'm
this
positive.
would I think this year would definitely motivate them
Yeah,
to make that change
yeah.
next football season.
And I don't know why that can't happen.
Yeah, correct,
Um,
correct.
you just plug in the formula and select the teams differently. And in terms of, yes, there's a complete off season. We have other sports leagues, name them, that work out travel plans and booking venues for an entire calendar year. They would have an entire calendar year to figure out where, and if nothing else, the bowl game sites are already locked in. So play the games in the bowl sites that are already booked for football games.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about, March Madness, and I don't know how soon that is, but I mean, it's a relatively short window that the announcement gets made of what region you're in, so on and so forth, and boom, they're making travel plans. So
Sure.
that's within, if I'm not mistaken, that's within like a week. It might
Oh,
be sooner
sure.
than that.
Yeah.
So,
Late Sunday afternoon, the announcement comes out, Selection Sunday, and teams are playing first round games on Thursday. So, a team finds out at 6 p.m. on Sunday, and they have to be tipping off at noon on Thursday. That's three
mhm,
and a half days. Plus, there's now teams within the last 10 years with the 68 that are playing on Tuesday and
mhm.
Wednesday.
And I get it. They're smaller teams. I,
Yeah.
I almost want to call them organizations because that's kind of what they are. But a smaller basketball team, but they're still, the logistics are still there. And like you said, I think it's feasible. There's a lot more kids that travel. I get it, that would need to go for a football team, but nonetheless, I don't think it changes the fact that we have plenty of time. And I think this will be a year, like I said, that a Power Five one loss champ will be left out, and it would just be great motivation. And it sounded like all of the decision makers from every conference were on board with it. So that's, I mean, I like you said, I don't understand why we couldn't do it the next postseason. And I would imagine the noise and the clamoring to do it right away is going to be louder, because if I'm for example, ACC president, I'm really going to be, upset if my one loss conference champion gets left out. So those types of things are, I think we'll hear more of it, but yeah, I think that should happen.
And I'm thinking of this maybe a little bit too simplistically, but if you think about it, it also makes sense that ESPN airs almost every bowl game. They air like 37 out of 41. They've got almost every bowl game. All right, they have the playoffs too. Therefore, if the playoffs get expanded, take up some of these bowl positions, they own the TV rights to those games anyway. So you don't even have to deal with that issue. Everybody just makes more money. Is that a problem? So
Nope.
more advertising dollars, better games, higher ratings, make more money for the networks and for the conferences. Do it.
Yeah, yeah. There, it would be wonderful. I think there's already, yeah. I look on Twitter. There's already scenarios being put out. Hey, this is what it would look like if the season ended today. 12-team playoff. I think there was 9-8. Alabama would be playing USC, and it was, seeing it definitely got me excited. Like, man, this will be, because I was originally someone who was not with expansion. But I thought it was inevitable. But seeing that definitely got me excited about it. I'm like, man, this will be exciting to see these matchups, because I think what it will ultimately do is show the matchups that I think ideally and idealistically, people want to see in the preseason, in the out of conference, that we're just not going to see them. For example, well, maybe Alabama USC is a bad one because they did play not too long ago, but just those big premier schools where some of them do schedule those tough home and home, some of them don't, and really there's no, as of today, there's not a lot of benefit of scheduling those games, especially if you don't win them. So it's difficult because I don't think the committee gives you too much credit if you don't win them. But if you are undefeated, like Oregon, for example, had they scheduled, I don't know, Duke, let's just say, instead of Georgia, they'd be undefeated and they'd probably be somewhere in the top 5 right now. But instead, they scheduled a really tough opponent and they took a loss, and now things are in flux for them. So it's a fine line, I guess. Of course, the fans want to see those games, but if you're being realistic as a football coach in a program, I mean, Oregon could make an argument. I'm better off not scheduling that game, and I would really control my own destiny.
Michigan fans may be able to chime in to lengthen this list, but I think it's ridiculous that we've played football for 150 years, and most of these schools more like 120 years. And there are matchups like Michigan and LSU, Michigan and Clemson, that have never been played. They have never played each other. Is this ridiculous?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think too, I think it's also difficult to forecast out 5 and 6 years down the line of a school that you think may be really good today, but in 5 years maybe their really good head coach goes to a different program, and they're having some turnover and flux. I would love for those games to be scheduled in like February or March for the upcoming season. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I just think trying to schedule it that way, it's just difficult. It's just tough to do.
The NFL should be teaching marketing to all the other sports, if nothing else. The NFL has made a national holiday out of its schedule release.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know anything about the NFL, you know that it's not even a big surprise as to, the times and the networks. And maybe if you're not going to be completely up on the formula within the conference, there's a few guesses, but 2 games within the division, the alternating, rotating out of conference division that you play everyone. And then there's only about 12 or 14 other teams in your conference that you could play for the other 5 or 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
So we could both sit here and predict without going through that formula. And that formula is known. So we could look it up and figure out exactly what every team is going to play. But we could, off the top of our head, list 12 or 13 out of the 17 games for every NFL team for next season. But it's still made into a big TV production, and it's an event. The college football schedule release should be an event.
Mm-hmm. And really, the way that I look at it, that should be, I think the college football scheduling should be bigger than the NFL.
Yeah,
like if you market it that way, because really it's only going to be what, 2 or 3 games really that you're talking about, because like, for example, Alabama, you got to play LSU, you got to play Ole Miss, right? The list goes on and on, Tennessee. So there's a lot of those games that are locked. The order might be a little bit different, but really people just want to see, well, is Alabama going to play Michigan, or are they going to play Clemson in the non-conference? That's really what they want to see. And that could be a huge ordeal, a huge viewing moment, especially if you want to do it in kind of that March, April, because I think February is the signing day. So that's kind of a big deal. And if you just want to try to continue to have big moments through, in kind of that dead period, great. March or April, maybe you want to avoid March Madness, which I think most of that's actually in April, but whatever. It's doable. It's something that you could easily do, and they should definitely do that.
May 1st.
There you go.
That's my proposal.
Yeah, that definitely could be something pretty interesting. So, well, Michigan, they have a pretty big, well, they have a game this week against Nebraska. And I believe Greg will be joining us here soon. And I remember vividly last year, the Nebraska week, talking with Greg, and he was just adamant. He's like, I really think that Nebraska's going to keep this game close. And at that point, Nebraska wasn't doing anything great as far as winning those games, but they were keeping a lot of the games close. It was just kind of mind boggling. So I wonder how this game is going to look this week, and I don't know. I'm interested to hear what Greg has to say about it. But as far as is your thoughts on it, do you think it is going to be, a close game like last year, or do you think this will be a Rutgers from last week, just a rerun?
I think we're somewhere in between. So, for as good a season as Michigan was having at this point last year, and Nebraska, again, like you say, playing well, being competitive, but continuing to lose, Michigan was a pretty slight favorite in that game. I don't remember what the spread was, but it was, I think, considerably less than a touchdown, like 4 or something like that. And it's 29. I think that shows us where Vegas is on this. And for anybody that calls me up and thinks, I hear this all the time, that we should be determining playoff spots based on what Vegas thinks. I do not subscribe to that theory at all. However, so they're going to think I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I do think that Vegas is accurate. I do think that Vegas knows what it's talking about and gives strong indication as to beyond the record and what seems obvious to the rest of us, gives us a look into it. That doesn't mean that they should be selecting playoff participants, but 29, I think Michigan is going to lay waste to Nebraska, but not obliterate them. I see this maybe in a 38-17 range, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I can honestly say I haven't watched much Nebraska. And I believe it's Mickey Joseph. Is that the interim
Yeah.
coach right now? So I can't say that I know how well they've been doing. Looks like they are, was that a 3-game losing streak?
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of, a bit tough. Lost to Minnesota last week, 20-13. The way that I look at Michigan is they are, to me, they're kind of on the freight train status where if you can't match up front, and I almost look at Georgia in similar lights, is if you don't have the horses up front, on O line and D line, you're just gonna have a long day. And I think that run game for Michigan, it's one of those things where you can have Blake Corum in there, you can have Donovan Edwards in there, and even sometimes with JJ McCarthy, I just think it's going to be a really difficult team to stop, and I think that Michigan will have probably pretty similar game to last week of kind of the 52-17 variety, something in that range. I just think they're just gonna have success on the ground, and I think when they do throw it, they'll probably also have success, and I think they'll go for more deep balls. You started to see a little more of that last week. I know they didn't connect on all of them, but I feel like that'll be more of a focus that they'll try to implement in the offense these last couple weeks going into the Ohio State game.
Nebraska was a much more capable offensive team when Casey Thompson, the transfer quarterback from Texas, was in the lineup, and they were playing awful defense, scoring a lot of points, losing high-scoring games, and he's been out the last 2 weeks. So they scored 9 against Illinois. I saw probably half that game. They were dismal trying to throw the football. The same thing last week against Minnesota. Their quarterbacks were like 12 of 28 for not much yardage. So without Casey Thompson, not that I would think that they would win with him, but it would be a more entertaining game to watch. but I don't believe he's going to be back. Maybe we'll find out from Greg.
Yeah, because that opening week, I feel like he looked pretty impressive, and yeah, just the injury bug, which has been his issue throughout his college career, and he just unfortunately can't seem to stay healthy. Whether it's I think it was a thumb or something
Yeah.
or shoulder, so he's had some issues. So that's unfortunate that he keeps getting banged up, and you'd like to see him hopefully get healthy. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think had he been in the game, it definitely would provide some challenges because I think he's got some mobility to him. I don't think he's a scrambling quarterback, but I think he definitely can move around, can run. So I think that would provide a bit of a different challenge for Michigan. But as I said with what game was it? Oh, when the Michigan State game, you can't think you're just gonna be back there and just kind of Johnny Manziel and running all around with this Michigan D line. These guys are good. They're gonna get pressure, and if you think you're gonna kind of run around and circle around, Patrick Mahomes' thing, you're gonna you're gonna find big number 90 Mike Morris or Oki, coming to give you a big hug, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna hurt. So definitely got to be careful, be disciplined when you're back there at quarterback. We usually do a bit of an Ohio State segment, but I would love to have Dre on with it because Ohio State had an interesting game. Obviously, they beat Northwestern 21-7, and I had a friend and actually a viewer, Corey, who watches the show and a good friend of mine, but he had texted me and he feels more confident, with that Ohio State game coming up, just because of essentially at the O-line and D-line, he feels like Northwestern did a really good job on both of those fronts, the O-line and D-line, and obviously he feels like Michigan's offensive line and defensive line are better than Northwestern's, which I don't think too many people are going to argue with that. So that was his feeling in the game. Obviously, we still got a couple weeks left, but as an Ohio State fan, what was your take from the game? Obviously, it's a win, so you win and you get out of there. But what was your take on the game, the Ohio State beating Northwestern?
I think that Michigan is playing better overall than Ohio State right now for one specific reason. Michigan has arguably the best running attack in college football, and Ohio State is not moving people out of the way. They had a dismal rushing attack against Iowa. That was somewhat understandable. Iowa chose to man up the receivers and load the box, but still, they never ran the ball well against Iowa. Then Penn State, the same thing. They finally broke free mid-fourth quarter against Penn State and popped some runs that broke free the game. But against Northwestern, same thing. If you look at the stats, I had somebody throw the stats in my face after I talked about Ohio State not being able to run the ball. And you got to understand the context of the stats. I'm a big stats guy too, but you got to understand the context. 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, over and over and over. I don't know how many times Ohio State couldn't make a 3rd or a 4th and 1 against Northwestern, to the point where they finally had CJ Stroud pull it and run around end and fool the entire Northwestern defense, because I don't think he's done that the entire season, and ran for 20, 25 yards. And then they had another designed play for CJ Stroud. So point number one on Ohio State, and both have to do with the running game, is that, no, 3 points. Number one is their offensive line. It's an offensive line issue. And it's mostly an interior offensive line issue. It's a guard issue on both sides of the line. That's most of their issue. Number two that I took away from that game is Ohio State scored its first touchdown on an end around with a lot of window dressing, but it turned out just to be an end around to Mecca Ibuka. And as soon as he scored that touchdown after they couldn't run that entire first half, I thought, are they going to? This is the third straight game they can't run the ball, and Northwestern was 109th in the nation against the run. Is this what they're going to do to supplement a traditional running game with running backs from traditional sets? Try to utilize wide receivers in the running game and do some different things. And then once Stroud pulled it and ran, and then later in the game, they had another designed run for him. And that's when I really started thinking, okay, was Ryan Day waiting for the Michigan game to unleash CJ Stroud as just, I don't want to call him a weapon. He's not a weapon, but hey, when it's completely unexpected, sure, he can put one foot in front of the other. He can run when there's this wide open space. Was he waiting for Michigan and this game got too uncomfortable that he brought it out early? Or did he think all along, I'm going to put this on tape a couple weeks before the Michigan game and make them have to prepare and use up practice time to prepare for this? And then my point number 3 is Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson, for as good as they are, they're both not anywhere close to 100%. So they got 2 hurt running backs.
Yeah, and it was, I think that was Mayan Williams that had the wrist, I think, injury in the Penn State game.
Yeah.
So I was watching that, and it was interesting. I was watching the Penn State game, and I was actually tweeting during it because, it obviously got tight at different spots, and there were gotta have it downs on 3rd and long, and there was one 3rd and long. And CJ Stroud went to Marvin Harrison Jr. And of course, because he is unreal, he made the catch, 1st down. And I mean, just basically 2 plays later, it was another 3rd and long, gotta have it. And I tweeted, man, if I were the defensive coordinator for Penn State, I'd be double teaming number 18. I'm like, they're probably going to him. And lo and behold, he went back to 18 and he was open, made the catch. And he just made play after play. So he is terrific, but I do remember seeing, Williams banged up, kind of that wrist injury. I think he ended up coming out of the game, and Henderson, because I think both of those running backs are terrific. I mean, we've seen them both go over 100 yards, 150 plus, so they're really good. But no matter how good you are as a running back, you've got to have your O-line kind of in tandem, working together. And I think, to Michigan's credit, I think that's where it works out really well. Is I think they have the especially in the run game, the perfect combination of your big guys are moving people, and you have dynamic running backs who can make moves at the 2nd level, 3rd level, and go 50, 60 yards to the house.
Yeah, Ohio State cannot get into a game where they're trying to beat an entire football team with 3 people, with Stroud and 2 receivers. And Ohio State's pass protection has been really good. So the offensive line is doing the job in that way, and these guys are going to be playing in the NFL. I don't know why they can't create running lanes. It's bad. Yeah.
It's interesting because originally last year I was of the thought that I felt like Ryan Day has tendencies to get a little pass happy, but when you're not having production in the run game, then it's hard to stick with it. But sometimes just the threat of the run game is enough. But if a team knows that you're just only gonna just throw the ball and air it out, it gets really difficult to be as effective when they just know it's coming.
Michigan fans are going to laugh at this, and maybe Ohio State fans will cringe at it, but it may be a factor. We never talk about weather, but the weather at this game,
it may.
Ohio State wants it to be 60 and completely calm, and Michigan wouldn't mind what we saw around college football on Saturday, especially at Northwestern.
Yeah, it was that was some pretty wicked wind that was going on, but yeah, it absolutely would be interesting. I mean, I expect it, in the Midwest. Obviously, Mark, you used to live in I think Ohio, also Connecticut, so in November, especially around Thanksgiving, even if the weather is calm, it's gonna at least be cold, and it most likely might be windy and snowing and raining. So you just never know. You just never know. Dre, what's going on, my man? How you doing?
Doing well. Apologies for a late arrival. Had some last minute baby stuff to pop up. So, um, do daddy duty calls. So literally,
They don't work on our schedule. They don't work on our schedule.
they do not. They do not.
You guys
So
don't think if
catch me
you
up to
lay
speed.
down the name, the voice of college football, they'll start to fall in line? No,
You would think. I would hope so. I would
no.
hope so. So catch me up to speed. What has been the point of conversation?
So we were just talking actually a little Ohio State and Michigan. Well, Ohio State Northwestern. Um, so was just getting Mark's kind of take on the game itself, and but yeah, and then we have a couple super chats. So Dre, this will be a perfect time to have you on in. So realistic one, thank you so much for the super chat. Definitely appreciate it. Says biggest threat to Michigan if they make the college football playoff. Dre, what
Oh,
are your thoughts?
well, that's easy. Georgia. Georgia to me has been the almost going on 2 years the most complete team in college football. Um, they have the upper hand in terms of the latest matchup. They just won last year. You would think they have the depth uh, advantage. I definitely believe starter to starter, Michigan lines up better than they did last year with Georgia. Part of doing Michigan being a little bit better in certain positions and Georgia regressing slightly. But in terms of depth, I just don't think that Michigan could hang with Georgia in terms of that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the game was going to swing one way or the other because of that. But when you start talking injuries, mid-game, and stuff of that nature, fatigue, that's when that depth can really play a role. So I think it's easily Georgia. Everybody else really in the country, across the country, I actually think Michigan is just as good as, or maybe even better. Tennessee puts up a ton of points, but defensively they're very suspect to me. Um, I think Ohio State and Michigan. I look at Ohio State and Michigan as 1A, 1B. I think they're very, very close. I think they're stylistically very different, but in terms of, I think they're both very good teams. I don't think neither of them are great. Um, if you want to say TCU, you know how I feel about TCU, Des. I don't think they are legitimate threats to any one of the big three right now. I think they remind me of a Notre Dame, Oklahoma type team, in which in the Big 12, in their particular conference, their particular schedule, they're clearly the better team. But when they match up against teams that are a lot more physical, maybe a little bit more talented as well, you probably will see them get exposed a little bit. So I think it's easily Georgia.
Mark, what say you?
Yeah, I think that's an easy answer. It's a direct answer. Georgia's the best team in the country until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
So I'll ask a question the other way then. Let's say the four that, well, I guess it's a bit. Who's the toughest challenge for Georgia? Should they make the college football playoff? Dre, I'll go with you first.
Biggest threat to Georgia. Okay, I
Hmm.
like the way you posed that. Um, I hmm, wow, that's just a tough one. Um, I would say either Michigan or Ohio State, um, and for different reasons. I think Ohio State, if they're healthy, Williams is healthy. I know he's battled a knee injury this year. Henderson, Smith and Jigba plays along with Marvin Harrison Jr. Um, I think offensively they can score enough points to keep the pressure on Georgia to threaten them in a fourth quarter game. And vice versa. I think from a physicality standpoint, especially on the offensive line versus their defensive line, Michigan can pose a threat to Georgia as well. So I think stylistically it'll be different, but I think both those teams can match up with Georgia from that aspect. Outside of those two teams, I don't think TCU can at all. We saw who Clemson really is. They look a little bit. They look fraudulent. We saw Oregon, how they look. Granted, early in the year, so I don't know how much that will look different. Even though Oregon clearly has played better football since. USC, no. UCLA, no. Um, when you really go up and down the list, maybe LSU. But I think didn't they play LSU already? Or no, they don't. We'll probably see that in the SEC championship game at this point. So maybe LSU, but I don't know if Jaden Daniels is consistent enough. If I trust him throughout an entire game to beat Georgia. So I'll probably go with Michigan and Ohio State, but for different stylistic reasons.
Okay. And before I go to you, Mark, we'll welcome Greg Peterson on. Runs our the Nebraska channel here at the Voice of College Football. Greg, how you doing?
Doing well. How about you guys?
We are doing great. I'm going to kick this question to Mark, let you get acclimated a bit, and then I'll come to you, Greg. So, Mark, who do you think, now kind of flip the question, who is the biggest threat to Georgia if they do make the college football playoff?
Yeah, I'm right there with Dre in terms of Ohio State, Michigan. I'm not going to repeat all his points because I'm right there with him on what those two teams pose. I do think that Michigan is a lot like Georgia or Georgia like Michigan. So if Michigan gets outclassed or isn't at their level, then we're going to see something similar to what we saw last year. But I do think Michigan's better this year than they were last year and have a threat at quarterback that could open things up. So they got the potential to even provide, to a certain extent, what Ohio State provides as their main threat. So I'm a little more sure about Michigan. Michigan's playing better football right now. Besides those two, people don't want to hear this, but all the options are right inside the SEC. And even though we're not going to see them, the third or fourth choice for me would be Alabama to play Georgia. So I don't care how many games they lose, especially when they're losing in the last play of the game twice. So everybody's happy, or a lot of people are happy Alabama's been dismissed. And they probably are. There are ways that they could sneak back into an SEC championship game. Because, man, you mix up LSU and Ole Miss against Arkansas and Texas A&M. From a talent standpoint, those aren't mismatches at all. They're just, those teams just aren't playing well, talking about Arkansas and Texas A&M. So anyway, I'd put Alabama on a field after Ohio State and Michigan with Georgia if I wanted to win a game. And then Tennessee right there, difficult to beat. History tells us this, difficult to beat a team a second time. So those would be the teams I would go to before anybody else, anywhere else.
Tennessee has no defense.
The defense has struggled a bit. Greg, who would you say is
No,
true?
I've been listening to you guys, yeah, and I was thinking Alabama the whole time because don't count Alabama out; they can still sneak in there. So, no, that's what came to mind first for me.
I think the issue with Alabama is they have showed consistent bad signs of a flawed football team, albeit very, very talented football team, flawed, especially defensively. And offensively, I think this is one of the most non-explosive from a receiver core standpoint in quite a while. And, I would argue this. If they didn't have the spectacular play of Bryce Young and had a just good quarterback play, I think they could have 3, maybe 4 losses this year. I don't think they make it out of Texas. I'm not sure if they even make it past Texas A&M. So you're looking at 3 or 4 losses right there. Now, you always have the stigma that as Alabama, and from a talent standpoint, they should be able to compete with anybody. But something has been off this year. But to Mark's point, I think the X factor is, if you're talking about one game take off or SEC title game, we all know that Saban's record works his assistants. Now, yes, Kirby Smart got him the latest time, but you just never know. Saban has time to game plan for him. I agree, Mark, from that aspect that you couldn't count Alabama out to steal one versus Georgia, no matter how inconsistent Bama has looked this year.
They are one excruciating play in 2 games away from being undefeated. And they played in 2 of the most hostile environments in college football. So they
I
seem to
get
be
it.
like, oh, what's wrong with Bama? And they're horrible this year and all this other stuff. And I get it. And they didn't play with Bryce Young against Texas A&M. And they still took LSU, who now is the talk of college football, down to the last play of the game, a 2-point conversion in Death Valley, and the same thing at Tennessee. It took a wild missed field goal, other end, one big play, Hendon Hooker to Wyatt or one of the wideouts, field goal going the other way. It took craziness to knock them out. If
But
they
you know
are
what
not,
it is? You know what it is, guys? It's kind of been spoiled as college football fans. So maybe not spoiled might be the right word, but Alabama has set such a high standard of consistency. That they pretty much click on all phases of the game every single year, partly due to talent, due to very micromanaging coaching by Saban. He makes sure that they practice very well and that all their T's are crossed and I's dotted. But this year, I can't, especially on the road, man. It's just the penalties that they committed. I mean, Mark, I'm sure you can verify this. I think if you combine the penalties with at Texas and at Tennessee, I think it was over 30 penalties that they committed. I mean, that's just, I don't care how talented you are, you're not going to win a lot of football games. So, I mean, I know we're talking about the biggest threats, but I'm just, me and Des have talked about this a couple times, off stream. I've been very, very surprised of the lack of discipline and penalties that they committed. But, hey, Greg, you're here bringing up some Nebraska. So we definitely want to give you that time to talk to us about this year. Well, look, man, I give you a lot of credit. We haven't spoken to you since. But last year, going to the game at Nebraska, we were on here, and you told Des and I that you thought it was a pretty good chance that Nebraska can give Michigan a run for their money, and they did. I dismissed it. I'm like, no way. Adrian Martinez is a turnover magnet. You can't trust him. And lo and behold, he did turn the ball over late. But it definitely was not a cakewalk by no stretch of the imagination. And I want to get your thoughts on this. Since the dismissal of Scott Frost, I anticipated that the program will go one of two ways. The guys will either get galvanized and rally and play some really inspired football down the stretch of the season. Maybe not in terms of the final results, but a lot more competitive. Or they'll cripple and just fall apart. And I think it's been more of the first. That they play some inspired football. So, what's kind of your feel from the program as it is right now?
Well, no, you hit the nail on the head right there. Mickey Joseph has, kind of energized everybody basically, and you'll never hear anybody say a bad word about the job Mickey Joseph's been doing, and he's obviously setting himself up for a head coaching job here, if not at Nebraska, somewhere else. And you took a team that was uninspired. Quite frankly, hasn't even been tackling, for years in practice, and that showed. And with Mickey Joseph and Bill Bush being elevated to their positions, that two of the most energizing guys that you've ever been around anyway, and it's really changed the whole demeanor of the team and inspired them, to play some really good football. Now, they've had their problems, obviously, but, it's definitely a way better looking product than it was, say, in Dublin against Northwestern in week 0, obviously. So, yeah, I mean, I like the way they're playing, but, it's a little bit, obviously they have to win out to make a bowl game. And that's a pretty tough task when you're playing Michigan on the road, and then you got Wisconsin at home, and then you got to go to Iowa. So it's not looking great, but I can tell you this: they haven't not given up. That's their goal is still in front of them to get to a bowl game, and unfortunately, we don't really know what the status of the quarterback position is going to be. In Ann Arbor there at 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday.
So so I've got a question for you, Greg. But before I ask, Cool Mo T says unless Michigan runs a spread, they will lose to Georgia 2 years in a row. Can't bully ball them. I would agree you can't bully ball Georgia, but I think Michigan's run game can have success against Georgia. It may not be 60, 70-yard runs like we've basically seen the last couple weeks, but I think it is possible. And then also Nick says, "Hey, Des, Alabama's O-line sucks." Hey, we can all agree on that.
We'll take some of them here in Lincoln.
I'm sure you'll gladly take them. What's interesting? I want to comment on that super chat regarding the bully ball. Michigan doesn't have to bully Georgia. That's not going to happen, but they can be effective. No, you're not going to see any big gash runs, right, by Corm or Dobbin Edwards. But if you can manage 3.5, 4 yards to carry, if you're able to keep JJ in the offense ahead of schedule, then you give yourself a pretty good chance. Mind you, you have to remember this isn't the same dominant defense that Georgia had last year. So, and you're a lot more dynamic this year offensively. So, and that's why it goes back to the point that me and Des have hammered, which is the importance of getting JJ comfortable in making passes when he has to, right? Because in a game like going against Georgia, he would have to do that. Like sometimes the run may get stopped for no yards, and all of a sudden you're at 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, and you got guys pinning their ears coming for you. You got to make a key pass here and there. So it's not so much about the bully ball, but being balanced and staying ahead of schedule. And I think Michigan has the capability to do that, but that's what goes back to are the coaching staff doing things week by week to prepare JJ for that situation? But no matter. Keep going.
I also wanted to highlight this comment by Antoine, who is always on our channel, and thank you so much, Antoine, for joining us. But says that Alabama's been kind of bad the last 2 to 3 years, which I want to make sure that we're clear. In 2020, Alabama won the national championship. That would be within this 2 to 3 years. Well, I would say national championship is there, and then also went to a national championship after winning one. Granted, they lost to Georgia, so yes, I'll get that. But I mean, within a 3-year span, the last 3 years, even say they don't make it this year to the playoff, which I don't think they will. We're talking about winning a national championship and being in the national championship as well. Even removing this year
with about 4 minutes left.
This can be connected to Nebraska as well, especially in the late 90s, and the 97 year and stuff like that. Sometimes when a program, you have programs like Alabama, where they're rolling so much and for so long where they almost seem like immortal, right? Like you just can't beat those guys. They're too good, and if you so happen to be close in the game and have the chance to beat them, you essentially have to play a perfect game for 60 minutes. And the minute that you slip up that last 2 minutes, right? You've been playing perfect up to that point. You could be down 3, and the game could easily end with you losing by 10 or 17 because they can roll you that quickly. The last couple of years, I think to Antoine's point, Alabama has seemed mortal. And part of that may be due to just a little bit more parity amongst the top, right? You saw Dabo and Clemson rise up and beat them, right? A couple times, going back to back. You saw Georgia give them a run for their money a couple times, right? They finally get them and stuff like that. Ole Miss beat them. So I think it's one of those situations where you're seeing Alabama can be beat, and they can be beat on the highest level, not just some random Saturday where they may not be paying attention. No, like some of these programs, when all the marbles on the table, they can beat them,
I don't see their performance over the last 2.5 years being any different than in any other time in the Saban era.
Really? Maybe the final result. I'm just talking about dominance, and maybe I have to do a deep dive into the numbers. I just feel like
I think they've been challenged by teams every year. I think they've had 2 or 3 close calls every year. Usually lose one game. They've had 2 undefeated championships, 09 and 20. That's pretty much what they did the last 2 years. And now this year they've lost in the last play of the game twice. I don't see the drop off myself.
I don't either.
Okay, well, let's go back to Nebraska. Go ahead, Des. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. So
we're doing an Alabama show.
Yeah, sure. So my question to you is, if you had, and I won't say anybody, but essentially, do you have maybe 2 or 3 candidates that you'd like Nebraska to go after as far as end of this season, and maybe Mickey Joseph is one of those, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on it of who they should go after and who you'd like to see come in, and then also too, obviously you run the Nebraska channel. What are fans saying as far as who they'd like to see come in to be the new head coach?
Well, I'll take the second part of that first here. A lot of the fans love Mickey Joseph. They fell in love with him before this all happened. Anyway, when he first got here as the associate head coach and wide receivers coach. But yeah, the one drawback with Mickey is that he has not been the CEO like this before. He's getting his first taste of it, and you do see, as great of a job that he's done, there has been those moments during the game where I think a seasoned and experienced head coach would have made a different call here or there that might have cost you, at least like a possession or give up a score or something. But, I think the dream guy would be Luke Fickell. He would be a perfect fit, but from everything I've heard is that he's not interested. Now that could change, but, and when after that, I mean, you kind of start thinking all these names that have been, going back and forth, like a Matt Rule. And I think it was ridiculous the other day that Frank Reich is flying into Lincoln on a private jet. And, we kind of got to let this thing settle down a little bit, wait for the regular season to get finished up. But obviously Chris Kleiman's a guy that fits the program very well, and he's been doing pretty good this year. There was a bit of a drop off, but now I think that his stock has gone back up a little bit. But yeah, just want to see somebody that is going to get, not like I'm not dismissing Mickey Joseph from getting the job, but you kind of do want to see somebody with a little bit more experience at that head position, where you're making a lot of decisions that he wasn't used to making right now. But in my opinion, he's come through with flying colors, though. Anyway, even if they have, they are kind of on the cusp again of missing a bowl game. That the ironic thing is that now with the last team to get bowl eligible, I think, what was it, Kansas? I think that Nebraska has now got the longest bowl game, non-bowl game streak of any Power 5 school in the country right now. So
it looks like that's going to change this year. I never thought I would say that Kansas football is in a much better place than Nebraska football.
It is right now.
I'm just saying, it's pretty remarkable to think about.
And the key thing here too, and this is, Trev Alberts got big time decisions going on, and I wouldn't put it past Trev Alberts right now that he already has his guy in mind, and if that is so, Mickey Joseph will be a part of this package as being retained on the staff. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Bush even is retained as well. So, and if you guys haven't seen, I mean, the construction going on with the new facility that's just going to be state of the art. It's so amazing looking that, you've got every resource behind you in the world to excel and to get this program back to winning ways. So, and the money's not a question either. So, yeah, we're going to see. It's going to be really interesting here. Black Friday, I think after that Black Friday game at Iowa, you're probably going to have a press conference on that following Saturday, and we'll know more then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I'm not sure if Frank Wright is something reasonable. What do you think about? Do you think it would be feasible, or do you think Trev made a call to Matt Rule because he's been terminated now for a few weeks now? So do you think it's worth a phone call? What are your thoughts on that?
I think they've talked. Oh yeah,
okay,
absolutely they've talked. Trev's talking to everybody possible. He's not going to leave a stone unturned here. I think a lot of it too is you have to gauge somebody's interest in it as well. Because, hey, you just can't dangle, like especially a guy that's being paid not to coach right now too. It's
true.
It's got to be a pretty good deal to. I mean, if you're getting $40 million for not coaching, why are you going to take a job for $6 million and go through all that headache and stuff you don't need to? So I don't think it's going to be, one of those NFL guys. I think it's more of a guy that's going to fit the Nebraska culture, and that's why I think a guy like Luke Fickell would be perfect for that. So I don't know. Mark Munkin too is a guy that is very intriguing to me as well. I don't know how that would go over with the fan base here, but like I said, in about 3 weeks, I think we're gonna find out the answers to all these questions.
Yeah, and I think the sooner you can get that announced, the better. To let that coach, if he does have a staff already together, nonetheless, to be able to really hit the ground running with recruiting and just trying to build that class. Because the last thing you want to do is kind of draw this out to January, February, where you have some potential commits that are ready to sign but don't know who their next coach is going to be, and having those conversations. So I think the sooner they can get that done, the better. Just to help this recruiting cycle and put that coach and Nebraska just in the best spot to succeed.
The ironic thing about that is the Nebraska is still recruiting at a high level. Just a couple weeks ago, they landed, a top 100 wide receiver, Malachi Coleman, out of Lincoln East here. Last week, they landed a 3-star running back out of Louisiana. So Mickey Joseph factor here is strong. And, these guys are not committing here expecting Mickey Joseph not to be around here next year. So I think that right there tells you a lot more than, we know that this part of this staff is going to be here.
Yeah. And that might be that may I'm sure that weighs into the decision of, still being able to recruit at a high level with Mickey Joseph being the head man. That I'm sure is going to weigh heavily into the decision where you say, well, listen, if these kids are committing to Nebraska and to Mickey Joseph, it makes sense to have him as the head man. I'm sure I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions because I'm sure it's not easy. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
I mean, bottom line, I think he can do the job. But bottom line, he's learning on the job, on the job training right now, doing it. The good thing is that he has a lot of experience at every other level besides the NFL. But his family is a coaching family. I mean, his brother has been a head coach in the NFL. He has those resources that he talks to his brother every day. They talk about their days. And, if Mickey Joseph is named the head coach here, I would not be at all surprised that Vance Joseph shows up here as the new defensive coordinator.
Ooh, that would
I had a
be
question.
that'd be nice. Go ahead,
I got
Dre.
a question for you, Greg. I'm just curious, and I kind of want to use this question also to kind of gauge the temperature of my fellow Michigan fans. How excited would or willing or to accept would the Cornhusker Nation be to Cade McNamara transferring to Nebraska to be your starting quarterback?
I think that he would be welcomed with open arms and 100%. Everybody would love it.
Okay, I think Cade, I think he's staying in the Big Ten. I think he's transferring, and I think he's staying in the Big Ten. And I like good storylines, and I want that kid to have success, and I think he can help a program like Nebraska, like Iowa, teams that have talent who should be in the mix, especially in the Big Ten West. And all he needs is a quarterback that's capable of making the right throws at the right time.
Well, and if you're looking at the Nebraska quarterback situation right now, with Casey Thompson, Mickey Joseph yesterday said it was going to depend on how Casey Thompson practiced today. Mark Whipple, the offensive coordinator today, said it's going to depend on how he practices tomorrow. Now, then the follow-up was, did he throw today? No, he didn't throw today. So that kind of tips it off a little bit that now you're going to look at, either a Chuba Purdy or a Logan Smothers. And, so fast forward to next season, I think, and then if you add in the lone quarterback commit that Nebraska has in this class, William Pop Watson, he's a small guy. He's a Mark Whipple guy, and I don't think he has any other option besides coming here anyway. Obviously the quarterback position is a huge question mark here moving into next season with Nebraska, because does Casey Thompson come back for one more year? He's already, I think he's already 24 years old.
His car insurance is going to be going down next year.
Yeah, that's right.
Does he come back for another year? And right now, Chuba Purdy has not looked very good. And you got Logan Smothers, who's been here for 3 years, that has been the number 3 guy each and every year.
Yeah, this transfer portal and extra 6 years, 7th year of eligibility. I mean, you're seeing these guys now, especially at the quarterback position, at crazy ages. I mean, it's a guy for North Texas starting quarterback it's North Texas. He's 29 years old. But it's just you're seeing, because starting quarterbacks for colleges now have families.
Yeah.
Married with kids.
Oh, need an NIL deal to feed the family. Goodness gracious. It's more than just money in your pocket.
Isn't Hooker for Tennessee? I think he's 24 years old himself. I think
he's been around. Yeah, he's been around. Yeah.
I think I saw a stat that Hendon Hooker is older than Tua Tagovailoa, Lamar Jackson, and I think
insane.
2 other quarterbacks that are in the NFL right now.
Justin Fields.
Yeah.
How could that has to mess with you psychologically if you're like Hendon Hooker, because you're looking around and you see these kids in the NFL and they already about to get their second contract, and here you are like, I'm just trying to make it, man. I'm just trying to get my shot.
I love school, man.
I love school. I'm here for school.
I mean, you get to a certain point. I mean, you probably got your degree, so it's probably just elective classes. I'm taking tennis, racquetball class, and football studies, all that type of stuff. So you just never know. These guys may just be hanging out, having a good old time. Eating good.
It's funny. I mean, you get to the point where as a quarterback, you're having more in common with your coaches than you are your teammates.
Hey, coach, who do you use for your car insurance? Yeah, I'm shopping rates.
Yeah. How's the wife? Yeah, my wife's good. Yeah, wife and kids good. Anyway, coach, I saw this on film. Yeah, after I put my kid to bed, those type of conversations. But anyway, Greg, look, one thing I learned last year is I would take your word When you say Nebraska's coming to play, Nebraska's coming to play, and you haven't quite given that much of an endorsement, which says a lot. Says a lot. You have a really good pulse of the team. Look, for their standpoint, they're a very proud program. You never want to see a program, and I'm similar. Not similar. I'm sure from the outside, people didn't want to see Michigan probably look as bad as they looked under the Rich Rod years. It's just not good for college football, or maybe some did, right? But I definitely think Nebraska, should be in a conversation, especially in the Big Ten West every year. And you just want to see those kids continue to fight and finish the season strong because, that was quite a, big change, Scott Frost being canned, 3 games into the season?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The one thing that you got to take, I mean, they've been down since before Frost was hired here, and there's not a lot of other programs that you'll ever see that still fill up the stadium every Saturday and come out and support their team on the road as well. And, so you definitely have the backing here. And obviously, there's a group of, 8 to 10 blue blood programs, and Nebraska is one of them. And yeah, you're right. It's better for college football when all those programs are doing well. And I am confident that it'll get back there, sooner or later here. I don't even remember what a bowl trip is like anymore. So it's really depressing that I'm around during Christmas time. It's been for years now. 6 years. It's crazy. 7 years.
Man.
And no.
I can see it on your face, Greg. I can see it's wearing on you. I can see.
It's hard.
Let me tell you something. Even the lower bowls are very humbling, man. I never forgot how low I felt watching in 2013 Michigan play in the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl, where Shane Morris is starting, and I'm watching, and I'm like, we were 6-6 playing in the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl, and I think Kansas State was the team, and I just couldn't believe how far we have fallen. I'm like, what is this? But hey,
I'll give my right pinky finger to go to that.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. We will be here post game from the Michigan-Nebraska game, and is that a 3:30 game?
Yep,
yes.
3:30 your time. Yeah.
Perfect, 3:30 game. So we will be here post game. Thanks again, Greg. We greatly appreciate it for joining us. Everybody, please give us a thumbs up on your way out. Enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, and that is it for us.
See ya.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
See ya.